we have a picture here of a single neuron in the very start of another one here. And like we said, a neuron is one single nerve cell. So nerve cells are what our nervous system is made of. Again, a cell is the simplest level of organization. So when we look at a nerve cell, a neuron like this, we have the main part of the cell is the cell body. Okay, it contains the nucleus. It's kind of like the control center. It has the other organelles in there as well. And then sort of surrounding that cell body are all of these branches. They kind of look like branches of a tree. Those are called the dendrites. And what's happening is those dendrites, those branches, you could think of them sort of, they're all waiting sort of for a message from another nerve cell. So each of these, this tiny little branch, and this branch, this branch, this one, they all could be connected to other neurons. And so we have this very, very intricate network of these neurons all sort of interconnected. And that allows information to be passed from one place to another, for information to be interpreted in our brain and so forth. So those little branches are the dendrites. When they do get a message, what happens is they start sending that message along. They sort of convey the message or forward the message on. And that message gets turned into an electrical signal that starts to move through the neuron. Goes into the cell body, travels down the axon. The axon is this elongated part of the neuron. Along the way, you could see this blue stuff. That's like insulation. Okay? It's a fatty substance called myelin. And it surrounds the nerve, the axon of the nerve, allowing the electrical signal to be conveyed more quickly because of that insulation. So this electrical signal starts in the dendrite, travels down the axon until it gets to the very end, the terminal. That's the end. So if this message, though, once it gets there, if it's going to be passed on to another neuron, well, there's a gap here. There's a space. You see, the terminals of one neuron don't actually connect with the dendrites of the next neuron. There's a space. The space is called the synapse. And what happens is once the electrical signal gets to the terminal, it can't go any further. What happens is the terminals then release chemicals into the space. They're called neurotransmitters. And these chemicals are released by the terminals, and they attach to the dendrites of the next nerve, and that starts the impulse traveling down that nerve cell. Then it gets to the terminals, and then it goes to another nerve cell. So you have this message sent from one neuron to another, until it actually reaches its destination. So right now, as your brain is telling your arm how to move, to write your notes, your brain sends a nerve impulse. It starts going from one neuron. Then it goes to another neuron, and another one, until it actually gets to your muscles. And those neurons attach to your muscles, and they tell it how to move. So the messages get conveyed through these neurons.
How big are the neurons?
They're fairly small, a neuron itself, but a whole group of neurons form some nerve tissue. Okay? Cells working together form tissue. And those nerve tissue are longer. They form actual nerves. A bunch of nerve tissue forms a nerve, which is much bigger. And it would be visible and you could see. Now, the other important thing is that the way these neurons work, as we use certain neurons, there may be a certain pathway that you use over and over again. How many musicians? Okay. So, if you play your instrument, you play, let's say, a scale on the clarinet. Okay? You practice this at your instrument?
I used to.
Okay. So you practice a scale in your fingers. It's true of any instrument. And you're working, and at first, when you learn a new scale or when you're first starting out, you got to sort of like think about it, right? You got to think, okay, well that note, I have to close my thumb on this hole on my first finger, or whatever. You got to think about each one of you, make your scale, and as you practice it, you're using, again, your brain is sending these impulses to the muscles in your fingers, telling them what to do. And you start off having to think about it a lot. But what happens is the more we use certain pathways, that insulation, that myelin around the nerves builds up, gets thicker. And as it gets thicker, those nerve impulses can move more quickly. And so these actions start to become more automatic. And so as you practice your scale over and over again, it started to become automatic, where now you maybe don't think about it at all. Your fingers just do the work. They go in the right position for each note. Same thing in sports. Okay? If you're practicing juggling the soccer ball, okay? Again, it starts off difficult. And it starts off, you have to see, and you're watching the ball and concentrating, thinking about your foot position and juggling, and it takes a while. But as you do this over and over and over again, same thing. You reinforce those pathways. The insulation builds up thicker, okay? And all of a sudden, it starts to become automatic, okay? And you start to do this without thinking about it as much. You start to become better at it. You become more skilled at it. If you're memorizing the notes in the scale, or if you're memorizing the states, and then you start off, you got to think about each one. Maybe you think about them and you work it and you practice, and you start to know all the states in the United States automatically without thinking about it. Maybe you're playing your video games, okay? And as you start off playing a new game, it takes a little while to learn your way around the controls. If it's a new set of controls, you have to think about it a little more. Which buttons are mapped to which actions. But as you do it more and more, it starts to become automatic. You don't think about the controller anymore. You just think about what's going on in your game. So we can increase how well certain, we call them neural pathways work, okay, by strengthening those neurons, and we become better and faster at all of these different things that require practice.
Or marching band, we have to memorize our music.
Mm-hmm.
So
And our dots.
yeah, and our dots. So
Mhm.
we have to memorize where we go and what we play, and it's like muscle memory so much that if we like close our eyes,
Mm-hmm.
we're still moving.
Yeah.
And we're going.
Yeah, and that's what people talk about muscle memory, and that's what it is. It's ingraining these pathways so they happen automatically. If you think about if you're a golfer, if you just golf, you may go and you are trying to correct your slice or something, and so you adjust your grip. Maybe every time you go to the ball, you have to sort of think about, okay, I'm going to line up this, and bend my knees, do this or that, and you take your swing. But you have to think about it each time. But over time, as you get more and more practice, you stop thinking about it. It just sort of becomes automatic. It's true of sort of almost anything that requires practice. All right. And so again, this diagram just sort of shows the same thing we talked about. This is how we call it a nerve impulse travels. It's collected by the dendrites, it's turned into an electrical signal, which travels down the axon to the terminals, and then at the terminals, the message gets passed on to another cell, or to a muscle that's going to work, or to some other organ.
I have a question.
Yes.
When people say I finally got the nerve to do this, what does that mean?
Well, that's sort of like just doesn't mean anything really related to nervous. It just means you don't have like the courage. It's just sort of a saying. Now in this slide here, we see that we also have neurons that bring information into our brain. We call these sensory neurons. Okay? So the way our nervous system integrates all this is sensory neurons take in input from the outside. So if you're taking a free throw, playing basketball, okay, you take in some sensory input. You're seeing the basket, okay, you're focusing on it, you're taking in information, okay, your brain processes that, so that information comes in, your brain integrates and then sends out messages through other neurons telling your muscles how to move, what to do. So we have sensory incoming neurons, then we have motor neurons which actually cause something to happen, affect our muscles. Okay? Now, this is Asaf Apollo, one of the fastest sprinters. He's the fastest, one of the fastest. I think he's the fourth fastest. So watch. So how many people just signed up for track? Okay. So probably you've probably never run a race. Well, maybe you have, where you are like in starting blocks, have to listen for the signal.
That's scary.
All right. So what I want to talk about is, so in world track events, like professional track athletes, okay, on sprinting races, you start in the blocks like that. The gun goes off, and that's your signal to start. What is a false start? Jared?
When you start with signal.
Yeah, and what happens?
You get penalized.
You're disqualified.
That stinks.
Now, in world track events, however, even if you start after the gun, if you start less than 0.1 seconds after the gun, you're still disqualified. Why? You're starting after the gun, so why is that a rule? Joe? Yeah, because it's impossible. No one's nervous system can work so quickly that you can hear the gun go off, convey that information to your brain, then send the message to your muscles causing you to start running. No one's nervous system works that quickly. So if you happen to start less than that, what were you really doing? Well, sort of, by doing what? Yeah, by sort of guessing when the gun was going. And maybe sometimes you happen to guess correctly, and you start your run just as the gun goes off, but you're still considered a false start because it has to be after 0.1 seconds. So it does take some time. We sort of think of that when we decide to do something, it happens instantly, but it's not really instant. Okay? There is like, sometimes at science museums they have little demonstration where you're looking at a screen, they have like buttons, and it's like timed, it says when you should press it, and you try and watch and get a quick reaction. You ever do those things? Okay, and again, you'll notice it'll tell you your time, but it's not instant. It takes, a quarter of a second, a third or a fourth, or a half of a second for you to see the signal, convey it to your brain, send the message to your finger to actually hit the button. So there is a slight delay. It's pretty quick, but not instant. All right. So soft power is a 9.72 today. Now there are some actions that can happen more quickly than that, and we call these reflexes. A reflex is an unconscious response to some stimulus. For example, sure probably all of us have touched something really hot, burned your finger, right? But when you touch something hot, let's say the pan of the stove is hot and you tried to pick it up. Now, you don't touch it, say, oh my God, that's hot, right? And then you let go. What actually happens?
You scream and
Yeah, do you have any thought about it? No, it just happens instantly, almost. But it's not quite instantly. This is called a reflex. What is actually going on in our neurons is that they're bypassing the brain. So you touch this extremely hot stove. A message signaling that hot goes up through neurons to your spinal cord and then right back out, back down your arm. Okay? To your muscles, causing you to pull it away immediately. It would take longer for that message to go all the way up to your brain, then all the way back down to cause your muscle to move. And that would result in what? More damage, right? If you had to take that extra half a second to get the message to your brain and then take your hand away, you're going to do more damage. So these reflexes are protective. You take it off before you even know what happened. And if you also probably know it doesn't seem to hurt right away, right? It's like you're like, oh, okay. And then that starts to hurt a couple seconds after this information starts to come into your brain and actually be processed. So those are reflexes. There's also other types of muscular reflexes, like when you go to the doctor every year for your checkup, they sit you on that table with that weird paper on it, right? And your legs are hanging off that, and they tap with that little rubber mallet. Usually they do. That's a reflex. There is an involuntary reflex that happens when they knock on your patellar tendon underneath your kneecap. That's linked by neurons to your spinal cord and then right back out to your hamstrings and quadricep muscles. And that your reaction is just you sort of kick your leg out without thinking about it. Just happens. What they're doing is they're testing that your nervous system is functioning correctly. They're testing your neurological functioning by testing your reflexes. Joe?
One time, my brother had a bathing suit on, and he was laying in the sun for a long time. So I picked him up, and
Did you burn your hands?
and I dropped him.
He was so hot that you couldn't hold your brother?
Yeah.
That sounds
and I
good.
dropped him.
I have a question.
Good brother. All right, Jay?
My sister was ironing her hair, being the stupid person she is. She dropped it. Well, she dropped it, and she caught it, and it burned her whole hand.
I did that
So is that like a reflex, just like?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as like you grab it, you would instantly, you may grab it by instinct, but then all of a sudden you would let go of it by reflex.
And she grabbed like the thing. She was like, and I saw it, and she was hanging out, and then she was and she dropped it. I go, you're smart. And she yelled at me, and I just left.
There are people that are born with a disease in which they have no
Oh yeah.
pain receptors.
And they can just like walk on fire.
And so usually people say, whenever I say that there are people who are born that have no pain receptors, oh, that'd be cool. But it's not at all cool. Because what is the purpose of pain?
To tell you when things are broken.
Yeah, to tell you when you have damage to your body. So people that are born with this, they need like extensive training, especially as young babies. They have to be always monitored constantly, because without a feeling of pain, you may bend your ankle in a certain way. You know, if you're about to sprain your ankle, you sort of catch yourself because you start to feel it starts to hurt. If you don't feel that pain, right, then you could just very easily break your ankle. If you don't feel the pain of touching something hot, you could just keep your hand there without understanding. Before you learn that I shouldn't do this, you can extensively hurt yourself. People that are born with this sometimes will scratch themselves so much. Like if you have an itch, you might itch it, but after a while, if you kept itching and it hurts, you're like, oh, you better stop that. If you don't feel that pain, people with this disease sometimes scratch all through their skin in huge wounds.
Awful.
They sometimes poke themselves in the eyes, not understanding, sort of because they don't have that pain receptors. So it's something that's it's a very damaging disease to have, and people need extensive training if they do it.
I heard this one thing on the Discovery Channel.
You can walk through.
And it said that if we didn't have pain, the human race would not exist.
Yeah, and it's protective. You know, when you break something, it alerts you that you have some damage that you need to be taken care of. Okay, or if something hurts, it's hurting for a reason, and makes you stop doing something or seek help for something random.
Like, if you turn on the hot water and it's like really hot, but you put your hand under it, how would it cold at first, but then it turns hot?
It's just because of the way I think those temperature receptors in your skin work, that it takes some time for them to register. Karina?
Why does it say ouch dog?
Oh, I don't know. That was a picture of Mr. Right?
A little girl died from that disease. She got punched in the face and it didn't hurt, and then she got a bee sting, and like she didn't tell her parents because she didn't know that she got it, and apparently she was allergic to bees, and it killed her because nobody knew, and she didn't feel any pain, so she died. It was awful.
Jared?
This is whack.
And it was real.
Like when does it feel danger?
I don't know about that one. Danger?
No, like if something's like harming you, if you laugh.
My list.
No,
I don't laugh if something's harming me. I don't know.
No, like,
No,
say
like
if
the other
someone's
way.
gonna like
No,
say
people are like, I don't know how to say this, but
like say if your brother was gonna like say
Okay.
every time we're like about to like me and my brother fight, every time I'm about to beat him up, he starts laughing.
Alright, I